managers, the ride's going to be drug tested. Well, I was managing a ride one time, and these 3 vets showed up from Champaign. They said, we're here to do drug testing. And I had no idea they were going to be there. So and you don't know what horses are going to be tested. If they usually test the first horse across the line, and if they're still around, they like to test the last horse across the line, and then the rest is kind of like a fishbowl. Let's just check random horses. So it tends to keep everybody honest. When you show up at a ride to enter your horse, you have a very intense veterinary examination. And if there's any gait aberration, anything that's just not right, you don't even start the ride. And then as the ride goes on, you have mandatory stops called holds or checks. And these are all veterinary regulated. When you come in, your horse is given another pretty good exam. If the vet finds anything he doesn't like about it, even if he passes the proper pulse, even if he trots out sound, but the vet feels like something's going on with this horse, you're out. And when you finish the ride, you're also given that thorough exam. And once again, if you don't pass criteria, you rode that ride for nothing because you are out. So you don't like get through the first 3/4 of the ride and then run the hell out of your horse the last quarter of the ride, because we will all be done then. But the term is fit to continue. And if the vet checks your horse at the end of the ride and there's a gait aberration, or he's dehydrated, or the gut sounds are low, he is not fit to continue. The vet said, I wouldn't send this horse back out. So even though the ride is over with, you're disqualified.
And we have the option too.
And there is rider option. Unfortunately, a lot of us get caught up in a ride and maybe don't use the soundest judgment. I'd like to think that we do. But if you come into a check and the vet passes your horse, but you feel like there's something going on, and we've seen this happen. People, happened to you at Southeast Minnesota, the vet passed her, she came back to camp, she said, no, this horse shouldn't go on, and she pulled him. The concern is always, always for the horse. And another really nice thing is, yeah, I have a great concern for my horse, and I also have a great concern for my competitors' horses. And my competitors feel the same way. It's probably the only sport next to dog mushing that I've seen where, Lois, are you cold? Do you want a vest? No. Okay. Where I've seen someone totally sacrifice their ride, their placing, to help somebody out whose horse is having a problem. And this happens, I mean, I'm not going to say this happens all the time, because we don't see horses get in trouble all the time. But if it happens, everything stops. The concern is for that horse. You're going to, oh, would you like to take over and explain the 3 different types? Okay. Okay, our sport has 3 different divisions. The first is called competitive, and as you could read this, but it is like, it's more like a road rally, if any of you have ever been involved in a car road rally. They tell you a distance that you must complete, and they give you a time to complete that distance. If you finish more than 10 minutes early, or more than, well, they give you a time. If you finish more than 10 minutes on 5? 5. So you got a 10-minute window. If you finish early or late, you get points taken off. So everyone is doing the same trail at basically the same speed. So it's like a road rally. And your horse is judged at the beginning of the ride, and then at least twice for the ride, he's stopped and his pulse and respiration are taken. Now this is kind of interesting. I don't know, does anybody know what a typical resting pulse is for a horse? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Larry, you don't get to guess. Jen, and you don't get to guess.
We're kind of horses.
Yeah, but you listen to mine, so. A typical resting pulse, and it does vary. It does vary quite a bit. It can be anywhere from 28 beats a minute to 60 beats a minute. which is quite a bit lower than ours. And a lot of it depends on the genetics of the horse and if they're a freak of nature. Like Jen accuses a couple of my horses of being, they're the 28s. They're the, but, so when you're stopped and the pulse and the respiration is taken. Respiration, typical resting respiration for a horse might be 3 to 4 breaths per minute. So that's pretty slow, okay? So when you're stopped, the pulse and the respiration is taken. Anything above a 36 pulse and a 2, so that's 8. 9, 2. Anything above a 36 pulse or an 8 respiration, you start to lose a few points. And so you're stopped once during the ride. You may be stopped on trail as a surprise, which is always fun because I like to catch it like the top of a really big hill, or just around the corner of a nice flat road where you've been galloping. You know, then they catch you and they take your pulse and respiration, and then you're red again at the end. So you can lose points for your elevations in pulse. And then at the end, once again, your horse is examined. If he started out absolutely fine, but he seems to have a little bit of sore shoulder, you may lose a point there. He may lose a point if his back's a little bit sore. If he tries to kick the vet, he loses a whole lot of points. We call those manners points. And our horses are pretty amazing because they have to stand there and be mauled and all their feet lifted and everything. And the vet is, you know, that's not going to put himself in any kind of danger. So manners points you can take off. And then they're trotted out. And if they don't trot out with the same energy and vim and vigor and exuberance as they trotted in before the ride, they lose points there. And then it becomes a point thing. So your competitive is points. The next point, and a competitive ride is at least 25 miles up to 50 miles in one day. And like for a 25-mile ride, you might be given 3 hours and 45 minutes or 4 hours. The manager kind of helps the veterinarian decide how much time to give you to finish, depending on the difficulty of the trail. You know, if the trail is really difficult, you might get 4.5 hours to do your 25 miles. Now, the next type of ride is called limited distance, and it's between 25 and 35 miles in one day. The fastest horse wins. However, he has to meet that criteria when he comes in at the halftime before he can go on. And then when he comes in, his time does not stop until his pulse drops to 60 beats per minute. So let's say, Lois, you're racing me, and John, let's get it, you're racing me, and Fred, you're racing me, and we all come in at the same time. Your horse comes down to 60 right away, and Fred's horse comes down to 60 next, and mine comes down next, and John's won't come down at all. So, so there will be our order of finish. The horses whose pulse comes down to 60 the fastest. So you think to yourself, do I want to race him? Do I want to race that guy who's 300 yards in front of me? Because maybe I'll come in a little slower and my pulse will come down faster. And even if he comes in front of me, I'll beat him. So that's called limited distance. The third is endurance, which is strictly a race. Once again, you're meeting all your veterinary requirements, however. An endurance race has to be at least 50 miles, and it can be up to 100 miles in one day. There also can be 2-day hundreds. There can be, I did a 3-day 180 one time. There can be multi-day rides where you, you know, that 3-day 180, if I got pulled on the last check of the 3rd day, I rode all my rides from that. So they're a big risk to try. A 50-mile ride, you are given 12 elapsed hours in which to finish. Now, you've got holds here, and those holds count on your time. So, let's say you have 2 hours of hold, well now you've got 10 hours to actually finish. Very few people take that much time, but some do. 100-mile ride, you have a whole 24 elapsed hours in which to finish. I told you I did the Tevis in 1999. I did it on a 19-year-old horse who was an incredible horse. I had no intention of winning or being in the top 10. It's just I had wanted to go to the Tevis forever. So we went out there and there was 272 people entered in the ride. And I rode it very conservatively, and my horse did very, very well. And I came to the last vet check, and the last vet check was about 7 miles from the finish, and we came through that last vet check looking great. And now it's dark and the moon's starting to rise. Well, it had been dark long before that. The moon, because you're going up and down the mountains, it's a tough ride. And it's beautiful. And I know I'm not going to top 10, I'm not going to top 20, so I'm like, I'm just going to walk these last 7 miles. This is so beautiful. I may be out here again someday, but never on this horse. Gamey, we're just going to walk. And I let people pass me, because it was so beautiful. I knew I should be coming to the finish line pretty soon, but where I found myself was in somebody's backyard. And I looked, and their porch light was on, and I thought, where in the world am I? Of course, now I'm whining and crying because I've ridden probably 99.5 miles, and I have no idea how to get to the finish line, and I'm going to do this for nothing, you know. The clock is winding down. I only have 24 hours to finish this thing. So I turn around and I start going back down trail, and I'm really upset and worried and crying, and I find where I was supposed to turn into the woods. Okay, now I feel better. I'll be out here again, but never on this horse, and I'm just walking along, and I hear 5 people come up behind me, and I start to say to them, go ahead guys, you can pass. And my horse says, the hell they can't, I am sick of this, and he breaks into a gallop, and we run to the finish line. But this happens, you know, I mean, you got 24 hours. We have friends who rode a ride called the Biltmore, which is, not the Biltmore, the Old Dominion, which is out in Virginia, obviously. Tough, tough, tough ride. They took a wrong turn at the 2-mile marker. They never found the finish line, and daylight came. They rode all those miles and didn't get a completion.
Who was that?
Bonnie and Eleanor.
Oh, really?
They did find a house that gave them some breakfast. All right, now we're going to a ride, okay? Lois, you're there on your Clydesdale. Fred, you're there on your Shetland pony.
I got my thoroughbred.
All right, John's on a thoroughbred. Bill, I put you on a mule, okay? All right. You pull into camp, and if any of you saw some of those old pictures that were up here from the 70s and 80s, we were flashing those pictures up there before we started. The sport has changed so much since I started in it. Nobody had a live-in trailer. Everybody had a pull-behind trailer, a stock trailer. Now, some people just had their horses in the bed of their pickup. You know, you slept in your truck, or you got all the poop out of your trailer and you slept in your trailer. Things have changed a lot now. A lot of people pull in with trailers that cost more than most of your houses, okay? So things have changed, but still what we do doesn't change. It's just our modes of transportation might change. We pull in, we park, we used to be able to park anywhere we wanted, and even in a state park, but now the camping Nazis have taken over, and you gotta have reservations, and you gotta park on the gravel bed, and you can't. We used to all be bunched up together. Nobody ever got hurt, but I'm kind of on my soapbox here, but that's things have changed there too. So you park, then you unload. Used to take me 2 hours to unload because everything was loaded on top of my stock trailer and it had to be brought down, and then I had to get everything out of my truck so I could sleep in my truck. Now, you know, it's pretty easy. And you set up your camp. You tie your horses. A lot of people now have portable pens that they set up. I have not gone to that. I tie my horses to my trailer. I've never really had a problem. So that's what I continue to do. sign in. You wander around, you find the person in charge, and you get entered. And then you wait for the vets to come so that they can vet in your horse. And I've explained to you this vetting in procedure. Your horse has really gone over with a fine-tooth comb. Sometimes you don't even get to start. You hauled all that way, and maybe your horse kicked itself in the trailer, maybe something happened, maybe they're dehydrated from a long trailer ride, and you don't even get to start. So, the vet in, and we kind of have discussed the vet in, but the horse he's really checked over for lameness, for muscle soreness, for dehydration. It's a pretty intense examination. But our vets, who have been doing it forever, can combine all this intense examination into about 4 minutes. I mean, they've been doing this for a while. And then there's a riders meeting where the manager is going to explain to you what the trail looks like, what you have to do, how much time you have for the trail, how long your holds are going to be. And they have the option of changing what your resting pulse is going to be. And I'll explain this resting, or should I explain it at a hold? I'll explain it at a hold. So they tell you all the information that you're going to need to know for the ride. What time it's going to start. If Bill the Bugler is going to be there to wake you up in the morning. Bill has shown up at a couple of our rides. I remember somebody swore it was a recording, but Bill's there. He's big into reenacting, and you were waking us up and calling us to saddle and calling all these bugle calls.
I think I yelled at him.
Okay. Sleep. Who needs sleep? You know, and it used to be, before we had these big fancy trailers, that Friday night we'd all build a big campfire and somebody'd bring a guitar and a couple of bottles of Pepsi. And we'd really socialize. But it seems like since everybody's got these big fancy trailers now with TVs in them, and a lot of the campgrounds now have electricity, so you can plug something in and watch something. We don't do as much socializing, but we seem to go to bed a little earlier too. Maybe it's because a lot of us are a lot older now, I don't know. And ride, sometimes in the summer, when it's going to be hot, we may have a 5 o'clock ride start, which means you better get up at about, well, I get up at about 3:30. Jen gets up at about 10 to 5. And I get up and take care of everything, and then I finally stick my head in the trailer and say, "Were you planning on riding?" And, oh yeah. But she has her good points. That's why I keep her. And then after you ride, most rides will, lots of times we have a pitch-in, a potluck, and the awards are given out. So that's pretty much what happens at a ride weekend. And then the next day, you do it again. Some rides are 3-day rides, some rides are 2-day rides, some are 7-day rides, like our shore to shore. There is a rule that all horses must be present and accounted for at the start of the ride. It doesn't matter if you want to start 5 minutes behind everybody. If you're not present and accounted for at the start of the ride, then you don't get to ride. And actually, my husband and I had something to do with that rule, because we had this, remember Kim Kingsley? Mm-hmm. We had this guy who used to like to pull in an hour after everybody else had started and still want to start the ride, and we didn't have any rule that stopped him from doing that. So we complained about him a lot. John got him so mad that one time he stopped riding, not John, but Kim, tied his horse to a tree, borrowed a car, and hunted John down and tried to have a fist fight with him. It was pretty funny. Kim's in jail now. Yeah, he's done. He might be out, but he did a lot of jail time. So that's one of the rules. And then lots of times you ride a loop. Some rides are point-to-point rides, but we don't have a lot of point-to-point rides because it requires so much more work, so many more veterinarians, you know. So we, like at our ride, we have a loop. You start here, and this might be your first loop, and then you come back to camp, and you get checked at camp. That way you can run a whole ride with only 2 veterinarians. Sometimes you have an out check, and that once again, if you